Have you ever walked into a fairy tale? That's what it felt like when we went to Bruges.
You're listening to Travel FOMO, a podcast for people self-diagnosed with wanderlust. Good morning, guys. It is our first morning in Bruges, Belgium, and it is every bit as beautiful as I remembered. And oh my gosh, I'm a little overwhelmed right now. Yeah. Oh my goodness. It is so picture perfect.
That, ladies and gents, was the sounds made by Hilarie as she was at a loss for words in Bruges.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
I'm Jamin Houghton. You're listening to Travel FOMO, and with me is my wife, Hilarie.
That's right. Oh my gosh. I'm sorry. I'm still fumbling all over myself because this is we're talking about my favorite place. It literally, I was just so happy to be back in Bruges, Belgium, one of my favorite places in the world.
Yeah, you loved it the first time you went. If you listen to the secret season, you'll know that Hilarie loved it. You clearly loved it here. So that little sound clip was audio taken from our YouTube video. So you'll want to go check that out so you can see Hilarie's face as she looks for those words in Bruges.
Literally, I think my eyes were glassy and I was kind of crying.
Yeah, you were so excited to be there.
Yeah.
And before we jump into all of what we did in Bruges and our experience, why don't you tell people why you love it so much in Bruges?
Oh, man. Well, I found out along the way on this trip, I found out that it was a UNESCO World Heritage Site, which became a term that became very important to me because I kept finding that all of my favorite places ended up being UNESCO World Heritage Sites. And basically it means it's a really protected historic place. And this particular place is protected in that the way the city was built and kind of set in time, it hasn't changed. It's protected in a way that they can't change the skyline at all. Any little change that they do to this city would really put it at risk for getting that title removed and no longer being UNESCO World Heritage Site. So when you go there, it's like you're stepping back in time. For real. For me, it feels like I'm going back to World War II times, but I don't even know if that's even the relevant time frame. But that's always what I think of, is I feel like a soldier who got off the train and is coming home after a war is what it makes me feel like.
Yeah, I can see that. And especially since there are cars and more modern things, but really it's a medieval city. So you're really looking at the 1500s.
Crazy,
what's there, and it's so cool to be there, and it's so well preserved. It is just like a little time capsule, and it's a small city, which is cool. It's not this huge thing. It's a very walkable, easy to get around, and just a perfect fairy tale land.
Yeah. It's got so many different canals, it's kind of like the Venice of the North. I think they might even call it that, have some nickname for it about Venice. But it's got all of these canals. If you go outside the city center, it starts to get a little bit more modern and you can see the hustle and bustle of the outskirts of the city. But for the most part, on the inside, it's just completely surrounded by a giant moat, more or less, and it's got these city gates where historically it was, how you entered the city was going across the moat, across one of these gates. And so there's all these city gates that are historic and really cool to see as well.
What would you say is the personality of Bruges?
It's clearly very historic. It's polite, very kind. People are very kind. It's very clean, very clean.
You know what? It really, really is.
Yeah.
No graffiti, no trash, none of that stuff.
Yeah. Oh no, it is very pristine. It's It's pretty quiet. It does have some retirement vibes, but that wouldn't surprise you that I live a place with retirement vibes because, funny story, ever since we even started dating, we'd be driving around places and I'd be like, and we're just like driving to Target or something. And I would look out the window of the car and I'd be like, oh, that's a nice little apartment complex. Like, I want to live there. That's nice.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, every single time you'd be like, that's a retirement village.
Yep, that's assisted living center.
So apparently I'm down with retirement vibes.
Yeah. You're just waiting to get to the appropriate age where you can start going to Furs at 4:30 in the afternoon and having your dinner and then going back to the assisted living center and just playing some bingo.
Well, the funny part is, like, Bruges actually, which I did not know this until this trip, Bruges is a cruise stop destination.
Yeah.
So people on cruises, they stop, they come in for the day, and they see the city for the day, which is pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
But I have to say, it's really cool at night.
It's beautiful at night.
So I would say, like, if you're on a cruise and you get to stop, you should totally take advantage of it. But I would recommend coming where you can see it in the early morning light. You can see it at sunset. You can see it at night because it is so well lit. Mm-hmm. All the canals and the buildings, they go to great effort to light it very well. So not only does it feel really safe at night, it also is gorgeous. It is so beautiful because of how well it's lit. It's kind of exactly what you would hope for, but usually never get.
Yeah, I agree with that for sure. And I feel like it gets so quiet at night too, because the city kind of breathes. And like during the day, it breathes in like all these people from the cruise ships and like day travelers from Brussels and stuff that come in on tour buses and things. And so the city kind of like swells. And then just about dinner time, they all leave. Mm-hmm. And it becomes really quiet.
Yeah.
Again, and it's a great place to walk around in the evening because it is so quiet. You can grab a drink or have some dinner and go about and just soak in the city.
Mm-hmm. It is really quiet at night, like so quiet that you might have a hard time finding a place to eat if you don't hurry.
Yes.
Because we arrived a little late and our like Airbnb host was like, oh yeah, if you need to eat dinner, you better go now.
Yeah, you should hurry out.
Yeah. So, but still at the same time, like there are things going on. There are carriage rides and there are bars open and things that you can do, but just not a ton, not like during the day.
Right. It's not hustle and bustle like during the day.
Yeah.
One of the funny things that you mentioned the Airbnb host, they had like, I think like 2 DVDs in the Airbnb. Yeah. One of them, I'm pretty sure was like in another language, maybe French. But then they also had In Bruges with Colin Farrell. And so we ended up watching In Bruges there in the Airbnb, which is, it's so funny because it's a movie about a hitman, like this really dark, like heavy topic movie about a hitman, and you watch it in this like peaceful, quaint little village where nothing bad ever happens.
Oh my gosh. It's just the irony of that is like, yeah, no, this would never happen in this picture perfect little city that's so quiet, especially at night. And, in the movie, they're running through like shooting guns everywhere. And it's it's pretty funny. It's funny, but it's also like, yeah, like you said, it's a little deep, dark, kind of movie. But yeah, they always talk about like it's such a fairy tale. One of the places I made you walk past with me at some point while we were there was Charlie Rockets, which is the hostel where my sister and I had originally first stayed when we came, and it was still alive. It was happening. It was still like the place to be, but it was a much younger audience and I no longer felt welcome. So I was like, okay, cool, I saw it. I just wanted to know if it was still there, but there weren't a lot of other places like that, quite frankly. So
no, there really weren't.
Well, so I was just remembering back to like when we arrived like what, 5 hours late?
Yeah.
Oh, man. My goodness. We have the like the most interesting travel days, I feel like. And they're really not that bad, but like when you stop and think about all the things that go wrong in one day, you're like, gosh, that was like kind of a bad deal. We didn't have reservations yet the morning we were going to leave, train reservations, but we had our Eurail pass, which would get us onto trains. But in France, it's a little unique because France, even if you have a Eurail pass, you have to have a train reservation, which means you have to have a train ticket. You also have to have a reservation in a seat for a specific seat. So your pass, your Eurail pass is kind of your ticket, but then we needed those train reservations. Well, most of the time we could do that online, but not in Paris.
Not in France.
In Paris, yeah, in France, you have to go. It was the whole country of France. You have to go to a train station, talk to someone, and get them to give you a ticket. And so that was our first experience doing that, actually.
Yeah.
Having to do that in France. And so we arrive, we give ourselves like a couple hours at the train station because we're like, we're going to need to stand in line and get a ticket. And a couple hours didn't even scrape the surface. We were standing in line and we were realizing that there went the first opportunity to get on a train. There went the second train. Now we're hoping to get on the third train. Oh man, it was bad. And so we're standing in this line. There's only one customer service desk that would even sell you tickets.
Yeah.
Because they wanted you to use the kiosk, which we would have gladly done that, but you couldn't do that and use your Eurail pass. And it was going to save us hundreds of dollars. So it was pretty important, probably $100 each. So it was pretty important that we use the passes we'd already paid for.
Right.
And so we couldn't do that. I think there was some other option, but none of it, you couldn't do online.
Yep.
So we're standing in this customer service line, and it was insane. And then you don't actually know if you're in the right line, I guess you could say, because there's multiple lines. The signage is all in French. They make no effort to put anything in English or any other language. So you're trying to decipher it. Even if you can decipher it, you don't necessarily know the terminology. So even if you translate it, it doesn't necessarily mean that you know what it's saying so much.
Yeah.
So we're standing in this line forever, and I'm just I hope this is the right line. Finally, we did get in. It was the right line. I was really relieved about that because we were wasting a lot of time, and there are only so many trains you can get on in a day. So yeah. I'd get frustrated even thinking about it.
It was particularly frustrating because we legitimately stood in that line for 2.5 hours to get help.
Yeah.
And like you said, you're watching the trains and the times. And so the kiosks keep getting updated and you're just seeing well, that's the train we wanted to be on. We missed it. Maybe we can take this one.
Yeah.
Well, there goes that one.
Yep.
And then by then you're calculating how far you've moved in line and you go, I don't know, we're getting there today.
Yeah, for real. But also you're well, when else was I going to do this?
Right.
Was I going to spend half a day in a train station when I could have been at the Louvre? I don't know.
Yeah.
I kind of wanted to go see all those Paris things, but just the fact that you have to physically stand in line was crazy. And I truly think all the research I've done, there was no other way.
No, I think you're right. And you're also right. How are you going to spend your time? Are you going to go out to the train station on one of your only days in Paris so that you can then come back also on the day that you're leaving?
Yeah.
And it was just such a beating.
Yeah.
But once we finally made it to Bruges after our long train travel day, we checked into our Airbnb. It was a little unique for us. We stayed in an Airbnb and we had the second floor, and we knew it when we booked it that it wasn't the entire place to itself, but price wise, it made sense for us. And we saw that it was the entire second floor, which it was.
Yeah.
The only problem was that there was a living room, a bedroom, and a bathroom. And all of them
None of which connected.
None of which were connected to each other. And all of which were accessed from this landing.
Yeah.
So the middle of the house had almost an enclosed courtyard. that it was kind of built around. And so a spiral staircase that went a beautiful home.
Yeah.
But you had to go out on this landing, and it was they were the quietest people.
Oh my
in the world,
gosh. Yes.
which at first glance, you're like, do you want the people that you're sharing a house with to be quiet or not quiet? And you're like, well, I want them to be quiet.
Right.
But not when, not this quiet.
Yeah.
Because the floors creaked. And so every time you moved around, you felt like you're being disturbed. It's like you were like sneaking around, like you were like coming into the house after curfew or something, trying not to get caught.
Yes.
And so
every
time you had to go to the bathroom, or if you're in the living room watching TV or something, it's time to go to bed, you suddenly realize like how late at night it is. Or if you're getting up early to go for a run, you recognize like, oh, this is really early.
Yeah.
You know, like creep around.
Which is really funny because it's like, what are you so afraid of? Like, oh my gosh, they're going to know I'm awake.
Right. Yeah.
Who cares?
What if they realize that I'm walking into the bathroom? They probably thought that I didn't ever go to the bathroom, but now they're going to know.
Now they'll know.
Yeah. Yeah. It was definitely like, it was the least private, most luxurious place we stayed.
Yeah.
Which was a funny combo. And there wasn't a kitchen, but they did have like a little mini fridge and a little like breakfast bar area. So we did go to the grocery store to buy stuff for sandwiches. And I remember we bought cereal because we were going to have breakfast that way. And we bought what we assumed was milk. Do you remember this?
Yes.
Yeah. And so we like are going through, there's not a large selection of milk from what we could find. We find
it was the option. That was the option.
Right. And we looked and like, this is the only thing that says milk anywhere on it.
Yeah.
So this must be it. It was buttermilk.
Mm-hmm.
And it was super sour and did not go well with my cereal at all.
Well, we'd never had buttermilk, right? Had you?
I had tasted buttermilk before.
Oh, okay. So you knew, and so you knew it said buttermilk. Like we knew it said buttermilk, but
oh no,
I didn't know what it tasted like.
I didn't realize that it said buttermilk.
I think it did, yeah. Because I
sure
remember, like, I mean, it's the closest thing to milk we can get. So this must be the kind of milk they drink. But I'd never had it, so I didn't know how bad that would be. But it led us to a really interesting discovery.
Yes. We did go back and we found actual milk. Like you're able to get whole milk or 2% milk. But if you are in Belgium, you find the milk in the non-refrigerated beverage section. So next to like bottled water and like 2 liters of soda.
Yeah.
It's just out there. It's not refrigerated. It's not cold. They advise you to refrigerate it after you open it, but they just sell it warm in the grocery store, which really weirded me out for a little bit.
Well, and it was like that in several different countries.
Yes, it was.
And they tell you to drink it within 3 days, but also, which sounds crazy, but you don't buy gallons of milk there. You just buy a small thing of milk. Mm-hmm. And so the odds of you drinking it, you just buy what you need, which I love that about Europe. And I love that about Belgium and Switzerland and some of those places. Like you consume what you need. There is no waste happening.
What was your like little snack that you discovered? I feel like everyone's probably interested at this point in Hilarie's latest snack craze.
Yes, la femme de snack. So here I really liked these waffle crisp that they would do because Belgium waffles. Yep. So they're famous for their waffles, but these were like little snack. Well, okay. Imagine a waffle cone, and then imagine it if you were to make it and you actually have the dough all laid out like a cookie, and you I'm imagining they lay it out like a cookie, they roll it out, and then they roll the little pattern, that little print.
The waffly pattern.
Yeah, the waffle pattern. And then they cut it like with a circle cookie cutter. So you've got this little circle waffle, and they crisp it up and bake it or whatever. I think that's how it's done. I'm just guessing, but it makes a lot of sense. But just imagine like it's a little circle crisp, and it tastes like waffle, and it's good. I love me like a little something crunchy to eat that's not super sweet. And that was perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in your little like imaginary world, is it like elves that are rolling it out and crisping it up, or is it like grandmas?
Little
Like,
fairies.
little fairies.
We're in a fairy tale.
Okay. Yeah,
We're in a little
of course.
fairyland. Yeah.
Naturally.
Is there something you know about that revolutionizes the way you travel? Can it solve problems and help people around the roadblocks on their adventures? Is it just plain cool? If you have a product like that, we would love to tell people about it. Get in contact with us, and maybe next time we'll be talking about your product right now.
So back to that video clip that we played the soundbite of at the very beginning. That was at the beginning of our run on that first morning.
Yep.
Like, you and I watched the footage back and we were like, oh my gosh, we did really like this place. Like, look at this. This is so beautiful. Like, we'd already forgotten how just perfect it was.
Yeah.
It was really cold. And it's been cold every single time I've been. I don't think it gets warm there. Ever. But
is that the one thing that keeps you from like going and never ever leaving? Is that
it's just cold? Really cold, and I can't imagine being there in the winter because it's so cold during the summer. But we were there in April.
Yeah, we were
April.
there in April, and I liked the weather, but I like it to be a little cold. And
yeah,
so like a coat I wore a scarf most days. Like it was a little on the chilly side.
Yeah,
but I enjoyed it being that temperature.
Cooler side, yeah. But man, that was an epic run. We liked the one in Paris that we talked about last week. We liked that. But man,
yeah,
this was just pretty perfect. It's so hard to explain too, because it's that perfect time of light, where it's just, there's just sunlight is just doing its thing, and everything was so still. The water would reflect off of, the water in the canals would reflect these amazing buildings. And so not only are you seeing this building, you're seeing it twice because it's reflecting into this water. And all of the buildings, I had forgotten how colorful they are. I remembered them as like a slate gray. They're not. They're actually pretty colorful. And that like kind of surprised me. I'd somehow remembered it differently. And so when we watched the footage back, I was like, wow, it's a surprisingly colorful city.
Yeah, it really was. And that morning run was so great too, because Bruges is so small that we really were able to run most of the things that you want to see in Bruges. We were able to run past early in the morning. No one's out yet.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was an incredible way to see that city in particular, because you can see so much of it just on a run. Yeah, for sure. And the bell tower was something that was really special too. We really got in a workout that first day. I think we always hit it really hard on the first day because like this is another instance where like we run, and like it was surprisingly hard to run that because you've got cobblestone streets, a lot of canals, which means a lot of little inclines over and over again. Bridges,
a lot of stairs and steps and stuff. So it was surprisingly hard, but then and then once that was done, we got to go hike up all these stairs to the top of the bell tower.
We got to climb the Belfry. It's 326 steps to the top. But a really cool experience. It's the tallest building in the city, and was built as a bell tower that sort of served a lot of purposes. Like the bells would ring and mean a lot of different things, so it'd have different tones or different sequences or timing that would mean different things, signal like celebrations or warnings or fires or stuff like that. And you get to climb up and sort of learn the history of the bell tower, and you climb up a couple flights of stairs, and there's a landing with some stuff to see and maybe more bells or more history of how it was built or stuff that happened.
Maybe.
You have to go for yourself and find out. But once you do finally make it all the way to the top, there's a lookout, and you see out in every direction, and they have etched in the stone at the top like the direction that you would need to look to see different cities. So most major cities are marked, and they also have the mileage to how far those cities are away.
Yeah.
So it like points out, and like London is that way, this many miles. Paris is that way, this many miles. Zurich is that way, this many miles. And that was really cool to see. Another step that takes you back into history again.
Yeah. I think like all of the practical uses of the bell tower is what made it so interesting to me. Like you were saying, you know, they looked at a certain direction, and they knew if someone was coming from that direction, they're the Parisians, or they're, you know, like they are, you know. Yeah. And so it was such practical information. And then how they used the bell in such practical ways, like you were mentioning some of the reasons they used it, which was big reasons, but then also they had really practical things like it's lunchtime.
Yeah.
This is the bell for lunch.
Yep.
And this is the bell for the end of the workday. And, you know, I just think stuff like that is like, oh, fascinating.
It's hard to really picture it until you see a place where it's still there and they still function. The bells still ring and mark time. And so when you see it and you're in the city and you hear the bells chiming, and you start, after a couple days, you start to catch on like, oh, bells are chiming, that means it's top of the hour or this or that. You really start to understand like, oh, okay, like it becomes more than just a story at that point.
Yeah. What did you think about having to go up all those stairs? Like, it was a little unique because you're like kind of like Rapunzel in her tower, kind of winding up all these stairs. And they kind of make it a big deal. Like, if you know, a lot of places we went to were like, okay, it's like 300 steps up there, which I don't think that really should deter anybody. Like, it's unless you have like actual physical limitations, you're probably going to be okay. Just take your time.
Yeah, I agree. And you go up a few flights of stairs, and there's a landing with stuff to see, and you get to kind of take a breather. It's not like, okay, here we go, 326 steps right now, go.
Right.
So you can kind of work your way up. There was there were some older people that were on the tour, and like things like that. So yeah, I wouldn't let it stop me. It is and it is pretty narrow.
Like and tight quarters, so it's not like people are passing each other very well.
So I would say if you're a little claustrophobic, might be a bigger issue than actually physically being able to make it to the top.
Yeah,
it's definitely worth going up.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. And then like right there on like where the bell tower is it's basically in this square with the market, and every day I think they have a market, like literally like a farmer's market.
Yeah.
Like every day. And so that's what we did. And we like went to the farmer's market. We bought some fresh bread because we've been making sandwiches a lot.
Yep.
And it was really fun to be able to like get some fresh bread. They were selling tons of flowers. It blows my mind how in Europe, everywhere you go, people are selling flowers. Like, who's buying all these flowers? But then, like, you were like, we should buy you some flowers. And I was like, oh, okay, yes, I would love some flowers. And we got me some pink peonies, which kind of like poppies almost. They kind of look like poppies.
Sure, yeah.
Well, I was just thinking of like The Wizard of Oz. If you guys have ever seen The Wizard of Oz, Jamin probably hasn't, right? Because he hasn't even seen the Titanic. So he probably has never seen Wizard of Oz. But there are poppies, and they're like these pink flowers that are beautiful.
I do remember getting those, and it was like a big part of that market was just like flowers.
Yeah, it's kind of funny.
And you would see like people, like older ladies buying flowers, and you could tell like, I think they're just going to take them home and put them in a jar and watch them be pretty, I guess.
Yeah.
Like, it was really cool. It's fun to go to those markets too and just see like what's normal. Like, what are people buying? What are they into? Like, what's like actually for sale here? And like, yeah. Yeah, there was a butcher cart, several of them, and one of them had a full pig's head in there, which made the pork chop sitting right next to the pig's head a little less appetizing for me, but you could tell they didn't really mind it there. A lot of cheese gets sold at those kinds of things, and then fruit, produce, stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's just fascinating. Every time that we saw a market, we would try to go, and I was always glad that we did. It was just so interesting every time.
Yeah, every time. And then after that, we went to the Basilica of the Holy Blood, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's a chapel where they've preserved some of Jesus Christ's blood.
Yes. Which not growing up in churches that value relics, I think it's really interesting to go to Europe and see churches that have these kinds of things that make that claim. And so they've got this vial in there that is said to have the blood of Christ in it. And supposedly it will, like, in times of great need or desperation, it like turns back to liquid. And
oh, that's right. I forgot about that part.
Yeah. And I honestly don't know what to think about that stuff a lot of times.
Well, that was going to be my question for you. Do you believe that is actually some of Christ's blood?
I mean, I don't know how they would have got that. I don't know how that would have been preserved. If you believe the biblical account, he's with his disciples, and then they have the Last Supper. He goes out to pray in the garden, and then he's arrested and taken and beaten and crucified, and all of his followers basically disperse at that point because they're not wanting to get pulled in with him. And at that point, everyone thinks that he's dying. Like, they don't know that he's going to be resurrected. So I don't think anyone's like, hey, let's hang on to a little bit of his blood. That's going to be really important one day. I'm not saying that it's not possible. I'm not a big conspiracy theory person. I'm not a ghost person. I'm a very logic based, does it make sense?
Yeah.
Person. And so with relics, a lot of times it's hard for me to get there.
Yeah.
So I don't know, but there's a lot of things that I don't know, and a lot of stuff that I've been wrong about. So I don't know, but
right.
if I had to put my money on it, I would say probably not.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty fascinating, I think.
Yeah.
And even if it's not real, it still felt like a pretty special place.
It did. Yeah.
It's built in the 12th century, which goes way back. I mean, that's like a long time ago.
Yeah.
And it's, imagine like a Roman Catholic church. It's tucked in this corner of a square. I think it's called Burg Square. And it's tucked in this corner, and you wouldn't even, there's something there and it's special, and it's pretty obvious it's probably a chapel, but you don't necessarily know. It's not like this huge chapel or cathedral in the middle of the city.
Yeah.
Which is really interesting. And actually, if you do look at it though, as you're kind of approaching, you see like these really elaborate doors and this facade that's like really ornate. That is actually from the 16th century. I was looking it up recently. And it connects it's got a staircase behind it that connects two churches.
Yes.
So you've got like a lower church that's more Romanesque kind of church, much more basic and old. Yeah. Very old.
Yeah.
And then you go up above, and there's I think they call it a neo-Gothic church up above, and that's where they house the Holy Blood.
Right.
And it was two totally different churches though, it felt like.
Yes, like one's much more ornate and elaborate, and like you said, one was a lot more simple. And regardless of whether or not you believe that the vial that they hold in there actually has the blood of Christ in it. Worship has been going on there, and people expressing their faith there for 1,000 years.
Yeah.
Which makes a place really special.
Yeah.
And
for sure.
and you can feel it there. Especially I feel like in the more simple, like the more simple chapel, the older one, you could really feel the I don't know if you can feel faith but you feel that reverence in there, and it carries in there and lingers in there.
Yeah.
Which makes it a really cool place to go in, and and if you're a person of faith, to express your own faith in there.
Yeah. Yeah, it felt really special. In fact, like, I'm glad you said that, because so at the time of this, my Uncle Mark was struggling with stage 4 cancer. It was not looking good. It was a really intense time for the family, and here we were across the ocean.
Yeah.
And my Uncle Mark was Catholic too. And so being in a Catholic church and all of that, it really felt like one of the more special things I could do was pray for him. And so I lit a candle, prayed for him there. I don't know. Can you share that? Or is it like, if you like wish on a like star and tell anybody your prayer,
I think
then
it's like a birthday wish.
You're like, you're not supposed to say what you pray for. But I prayed for him there, and I just remember thinking like how special it was.
Yeah.
It was just so special. And he actually died while we were on our trip, which was really hard. We were gone for a really long time though.
Yeah.
And so we didn't get to be there for the funeral, and it was just, that's hard. It's hard to be away from your family whenever it really matters. And, but every time we went into a church, I thought of him.
Yeah.
Because there's so many Catholic churches there, and him being devout Catholic, and just thinking about him and my Aunt Kristen and my cousin John Mark, like they were just going through the hardest days of their life and feeling far away, and wanting them to be blessed and supported and loved. And sometimes my only way to do that was to pray for them while we were in a church. And every time we walked into a church, it just felt like that was one of the first things that came to mind for me.
Yeah, I remember you lighting that candle for him, and I remember you telling me that before you were going to do it, that you were going to light a candle for him, and I actually videoed it, and if you go watch the YouTube video, you can see it. But when you did that, did that make you feel more connected to your family? Like the act of praying for him and lighting that candle, did it bridge that gap of, even though that you weren't able to be there in person, did you feel more connected?
Yeah, probably. It's funny because though I prayed for him a lot while we were on that trip, it felt most special in that instance in which I lit a candle for him.
Oh, yeah.
And looking back, I'm like, man, I should have done that. And every single, cathedral we went into a lot of cathedrals though. but yeah, I definitely think something about like the act of doing that is more, there's so much more intent behind that than just sitting down and letting your mind pray for somebody, but then also letting your mind wander.
Yeah.
And I feel like when you're standing there holding a candle, like it's just, you're able to focus on that thing. And so it felt extra intentional, I guess you could say.
Yeah, like that, attaching it to that physical act, kind of like brought maybe a greater significance to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
We went to House of Waffles in Belgium.
It sounds
in
pretty
Bruges.
familiar.
It is not Waffle House. It is different. It's very, very different than Waffle House. Both serve waffles, and they could not be more different than each other. But it was really good. I think I got a waffle with like bananas and chocolate sauce. You got one with blueberries.
Yeah, that's great.
We shared a savory waffle, and it had lettuce, salmon, cream cheese, and onions on it.
Yeah, it was so different.
Right. Unlike any waffle I'd ever had, but it was so good. And it honestly is one of those things that I'm like, I'm never going to find that anywhere else. I'm going to have to make it. I'm going to have to make waffles and put salmon, cream cheese, and lettuce on them.
Yeah. You like literally have been editing that video and you've been like, man, we got to figure out how to make that waffle.
Yes. Yeah. But we got to learn a little bit about waffles. There's 2 different kinds of waffles. So when you're in Bruges, you're going to want to try a waffle. They're famous, obviously, Belgium waffles. They're famous, but the Brussels style is a rectangle. So it's a perfect rectangle that goes all the way to the edges. And there's a Liège style, and it's more of a circle where the edges are a little rougher. So if you picture not filling the waffle maker all the way up, and how the corners will just have like little half-finished edges that are a little more crisp, maybe that's a Liège style waffle. We come out of the House of Waffles all happy and excited to be in the fairy tale land of Bruges, and you took us into the torture museum.
Oh my gosh. Well, okay, so you walk up and you see like this torture museum, and it's like $8 or something to go inside, and you're like, that's crazy. Like that, like sounds like, but it also sounds like very medieval.
Yes.
So you're just like, ooh, crazy. And
well,
yeah, go ahead.
And they advertised it as being the oldest prison in Europe.
Oh, right.
Which made it interesting to me. I was like, oh, like this is more historical.
Right.
Yeah.
We're going to learn about this place, while we're there.
Yeah.
So we got down there, and you go down these really creepy stairs into like a dungeon-ish kind of place.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a guy working the counter. And there's like all kinds of like just creepy stuff everywhere. And it's not huge, but is a lot bigger than I thought. Because you're winding through this place and you don't actually realize, like, I honestly thought it was going to be like a little room.
Yeah.
And we just like see this little room and then walk back out. And we got down there, and it was like this winding place that like you're down in a dungeon. Basically, you don't know how long it's going to go.
Forever.
Oh my gosh. It wound and round. And at first we're like, whoa, that's like, they kind of start you out easy with stuff that you've heard of, like pressed to death. That was like the easy one, guys.
Right.
That was the beginning.
The gateway torture.
Oh my gosh. It was really, really rough. It honestly, like, I remember thinking, like, by the time it was all over with, I was like, this shows the absolute cruelness of man.
Yeah.
And the depravity of man, and the amount of thought that they put in. The amount of thought, like, you'd have to think so hard to go this dark.
Like, how can we inflict pain?
How can we inflict the absolute worst pain possible? What's really the point? Why do we do that? Like, honestly, I was like, why did I do this to myself?
Yeah, it was pretty rough. I do think that it's important to understand that stuff happened, because it's real.
Yeah. People
did that to other people.
Yeah.
And I think it lets you know where stuff will go if you don't check things.
True.
And if you don't stop things, they'll just continue to get worse and worse and worse until it's well beyond anything you can conceptualize.
That's true. It's like the whole idea of like, don't let history repeat itself.
Yes, exactly. We did kind of redeem ourselves the next day by going on a walking tour of the city. This was the first free walking tour of our trip.
Yeah. And so what does free mean? Let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Because it's great advice for people. Even here in America, there are free walking tours.
Yes.
Talk about that.
And so free walking tour means that you are free to pay whatever you think the tour was worth.
Yes.
So the expectation is that you're going to tip your tour guide at the end of the tour. And honestly, they're the best tours.
Yes. We kept finding that out, didn't we?
Yeah. And I honestly think that the people find that they can probably make more by doing free tours and getting tips if they're really good.
Yes. And then getting paid by your company to do it.
Right.
Because your company is going to keep part of that profit. They're not going to necessarily.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas if you give these free tours and people are paying you directly, I think you probably make more, and it's incentive to be good at your job.
Yeah.
To give useful and helpful information as well as historically accurate information, to be entertaining, to tell good stories. So I think sort of the opposite of a lot of conventional knowledge is out there of like, because when I thought of it, I was like, well, you kind of get what you pay for. These free tours are just going to be amateurs. How good could they possibly be if it's a free tour? But they were great.
They were. It was really shocking. Even in the US, like we've had some really good free tours.
Yeah.
Which is like kind of crazy. But I think you're right. Like I think people end up making a lot of money that way. So they're pretty good doing a free tour.
But it was through Walking Adventours, which was a great way. Our tour guide's name was Stephanie. So if you're in Bruges,
great job.
She does a really good tour. She took us to a chocolate shop. And they gave us a sample of chocolate, which we then had to buy chocolate.
That's amazing. It was a truffle. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So
it was really, really good. And I didn't know until then that like traditional chocolates, like the chocolates that you get at Valentine's or whatever that have stuff inside them, I didn't know that they were invented there in Belgium, and they were a way to get people to take medicine.
Oh, yeah. I'd forgotten that too. Is that why they were always filled with stuff?
Right. That's why they have a filling. It's because it was medicine.
Spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down.
Yeah, it's a way better than a spoonful of sugar. A Belgian chocolate. Like, yeah, sign me up for whatever. Like, just
that's awesome.
Inject the NyQuil in there and let's go.
Yeah, that's awesome. So Stephanie did do a great job, and it was so great to hear an American accent as well. She's from New Jersey. She did a great job. What is the most interesting thing that you heard that you learned from Stephanie?
I think for me it was that the city had escaped destruction so many times.
Yeah.
Like I think in World War I, the Germans came right up to the edge of it and then were stopped. During World War II, the German army was sent to destroy the city, and they got there and thought that it was too beautiful and didn't destroy it.
That's crazy.
And then there were other countless times, like back in the medieval period too, where it narrowly missed destruction. And so it is this perfectly preserved medieval city, kind of through this sequence of luck and missing out on being destroyed by war. I thought that was fascinating.
It's like a city so beautiful, its beauty saved it.
Yeah. Yep, exactly. I also thought it was really interesting. She told us a story about a time where the French had taken over that part of Belgium, and they were looking to drive the French out. And so they had a phrase, and they went door to door and asked people to repeat this phrase to them. And based on the way that they would say it, their accent, they would either realize you're one of us, you're with us, you're good, or you're not, you're French and we're going to kill you here on your doorstep.
Yeah, that's so crazy because that makes total sense. I mean, it's kind of crazy, but it does make some decent logic for the time.
Yeah. Like if you can pronounce it right, then you're one of us. You're in. This amazing to me. What about you? What are some of the things that you thought?
It was mostly about the homes because they're so interesting to look at.
Yeah.
And when you are there, you see a lot of the step-gabled homes.
Yes.
Which means that it's actually kind of looks like stair steps that kind of go up and they peak, and there's just these it kind of looks like stair steps all the way down.
Yeah.
So if you were to imagine that, like, they kind of are like steps, and so they call them step gables. And the more steps that somebody had, the wealthier their home was.
Yeah.
So you can imagine that, like, the more vaulted ceilings you had, the more the higher your home was, like, the more, like, it was like showing off your money kind of.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought that was kind of interesting because we saw that in other places like Amsterdam and some other places too. So the other thing I thought was so interesting is that there are symbols at the top of the homes. There could be a cat, or there could be a snail, or a ball, or different types of stuff. And all of these were on top of buildings and homes, and it really helped point people in the right direction. So there weren't street names or street signs back then.
Yeah.
For the most part, they used that as a form to help give directions. So you could say, hey, go to the cat house, turn right. We're like 4 houses down. So I just thought that was really interesting. And of course, if we had one, we would have like a swan home, of course. Anyway, I just thought that was like pretty interesting because I'd literally seen that and wondered why is there that up there? Why is that up there?
Yeah.
And the really cool thing is the symbol could represent your family. So if you were in a certain industry, you could put a symbol up there that represented your family. And so you see that type of thing even in Barcelona and some of the other places where they have really architecturally extravagant homes.
Yeah.
You could see that the things sculpted on there also represented the industry that the family
like what they did
owned. Yeah.
I would probably advise anybody, if you're traveling and you're going to take a walking tour, do it as early on as you can, because it makes so much more of your just walking around the city seeing stuff. It makes it so much more rich to know those things for the rest of the time that you're walking around, because you start seeing it everywhere and you're like, oh, that we learned about this and that, and we waited until later, and I just wish we'd done a little sooner.
Yeah, especially because if there's something you find really interesting, then you have an opportunity to fit it into your travel time there.
Yes.
And if you find out about it too late and you're about to go hop on a plane, it doesn't really help you. So,
right,
yeah. So, and then sometimes they even give you, we found from a lot of different tour guides, you get discounts on things. They might say, hey, go into the store, say this word, that's your password. It will get you 50% off of Belgian truffles. Right. And so that was the kind of thing that I thought was really helpful too. And we've used it recently, even here in the US, and got like 50% off of a museum in Treaty, which is like crazy, like super helpful. Yeah,
really cool. And ask your tour guide for restaurant recommendations, stuff like that. A lot of them will give them to you like just as part of their tour anyway. But if you're needing to know where to go to get something, ask your tour guide. They'll point you in the right direction.
Yeah, for sure. But, we did start after that tour. Stephanie did such a good job. After that tour, we started trying to do the tours as quickly at the beginning of our trip as possible. Yeah. It was just hard because we also did our runs on the first day.
Yes.
And then to do a walking tour on the same day of your run is a lot of walking, but it's all a lot of walking. So.
Right. Yeah, that's kind of what Europe is. But it would make for long, like a lot of miles in days. Yeah. But we tried to do that as much as possible.
And then, okay, so if we were to return to Bruges, Belgium, no, maybe I'll say when we return to Bruges, Belgium, what do we want that to look like? And the first thing that comes to mind for me is Christmas. It has to be Christmas.
Christmas in Bruges.
Oh, it'd be like
cold.
fairy tale. It would be cold. Actually, that's really funny you say that. I'm like, it's so cold there. I can't imagine it in the winter. But next time I'm coming, it's going to be winter.
It's only Christmas.
But I think about the marketplace.
Yeah.
And I'm sure they'd have like a Christmas market.
Oh,
Everything would be decorated insane. Like,
yeah, it'd just be stupid. It looks like gingerbread houses anyway.
Yeah.
I can't even imagine a Christmas.
Yeah, it looks like gingerbread houses. Wow, good point.
Yeah, that would be really great. I would do a boat tour next time.
Instead of a walking tour.
Yeah, they
That's
had,
a good idea.
and really glad we did the walking tour. And if I was only going to do one, I would do the walking tour first. But since we've already done that, yeah, I would tour the city by boat. I think that would be a really cool way to experience it from the water.
I did not want to leave Bruges. It was so great.
Yeah.
Loved it so much that last night. And then that morning when we woke up, I just remember looking at the window, laying in bed and looking at the window and thinking, I don't want to leave. I don't want to leave here. I love it so much. But we're on to the next adventure.
Yep. The wheels keep turning. We're headed to Amsterdam.
Another city with lots of canals.
Yep. So another canal city.
Very different.
Yeah. Very, very different.
Not
than
so
Bruges.
clean. Not so polite.
Nope.
Not so any of.
It has canals. That's pretty much how
it has
they're
canals.
connected.
It has some step gable homes. But that's about it. Everything else was very different. But it was fun nonetheless.
It was fun.
And we have some interesting history that we learned on a boat tour there. So it was one of the more fascinating places that I didn't know everything I didn't know about it.
Right.
It's kind of fun. So
yeah, we took a tour there where we learned a lot. We learned one thing, in fact, that once I learned it, I couldn't stop seeing it everywhere in the city.
Ooh.
So tune in to find out what that was.
I'm going to tune in to find out what that was. You guys, thank you so much for listening. Please subscribe. You can subscribe in multiple places right here where you are listening, and that will get you subscribed to the podcast. But we're also putting out videos on YouTube, and you can find us as Travel FOMO Podcast on YouTube. We also go by that in all the other platforms. So Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, all that. You can find us as Travel FOMO Podcast.
Yep, and you'll want to watch the YouTube video for this one. So much of what we've talked about here, you get to actually see for yourself on the video. Even that last night, us walking around Bruges and seeing it at night, that's in the video as well. So you'll want to go and check that out.
Yeah, that's right. And cheers to returning to your favorite places. Oh my gosh, this was so worth it. Because, well, life is short.
Wander well.